Up on PlayStation games. Greatest hits are on sale. Crash Bandicoot, Jet Moto.
But I don't even have a PlayStation.
You do now.
Mom know about this?
Who?
PlayStation.
Oh, the 90s. Okay, so a lot of you guys might be confused right now, especially with that choice of commercial. Isn't Tomb Raider a PS1 game? And for the most part, yeah, the series is, but believe it or not, the original Tomb Raider did not get its start on the PlayStation 1. It actually got its start on the Sega Saturn. Created by Core Designs, the game was originally going to be released for the PlayStation 1, the Sega Saturn, and PC. And they were primarily focusing on the PlayStation 1 version, but when they sent the first build off to Sega, Sony, they rejected it because they didn't think it was up to code. So they told them to go back to the drawing board, and as all this was happening, they entered into negotiations with Sega about releasing Tomb Raider as a Sega Saturn exclusive, or at least a timed exclusive, meaning that it would be exclusive to the console for a few months before it came to other consoles. So, as it would turn out, Lara Croft would have her first adventure on the Sega Saturn initially, so isn't that interesting? So, Tomb Raider is often regarded as one of the all-time great 3D platformers. In the game, you take the role of Lara Croft, a rich adventuress who is hired to, chase ancient artifacts all over the world and ends up competing with a powerful rival for an artifact that will grant ultimate power or something. It's a pretty basic story as far as this kind of game is concerned, but it works, and it does introduce us to one of the all-time great video game characters. Lara Croft is right up there with the likes of Mario, Link, Zelda, Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, and Sonic. So it was also interesting that they went with a female protagonist. Originally, their plan was to have two playable characters, a male and a female, and when it became clear that they would have to nix one of the characters due to memory limitations, they were encouraged by their producers to nix the female character, and because of that, they decided to nix the male character instead and go with the female protagonist, because they thought that would be more interesting. And it was, and Lara is still an icon of the industry today. As far as the graphics are concerned, though, for a Sega Saturn game, this is actually really impressive. These are some really complex 3D environments, and it doesn't run all that poorly, too. I mean, the frame rate is chugging, but what 3D game at the time wasn't? I wish I could say the same for the controls, though. I gotta be honest, I've never been a big fan of the original Tomb Raider. The controls are just so clunky, like you're constantly having to stop and adjust yourself to reorient the camera. The combat is really finicky. You gotta push a button to grab onto ledges, which is really awkward. It's easy to forget to do that. It just has not held up, especially these days where games like Tomb Raider are so common and have such fluid controls. It's just really hard to go back to this game after all these years. It's not necessarily that it's terrible, it's just that time has not been kind to it in the slightest. Now, I don't think Tomb Raider was a huge hit on the Sega Saturn, and even if it was, it didn't really matter, because when the game was released on the PlayStation, man, what an overhaul. Like, Sony rejected the initial version of the game because they didn't think it was up to code, and, well, leaving it in the oven for a longer period of time certainly did a number on it. Yeah, it looks so much better than the old Sega Saturn version, that's for sure. The game would also do really well on the PlayStation, and because of that, Sony would lock core designs down into an exclusivity deal. So all future Tomb Raider games would only be released on Sony consoles for the longest time. To be honest, I haven't played all these games yet. This was actually the first time I've played the original Tomb Raider. And so I'm not terribly excited to check out the rest of the games in the series, but I do know they go downhill, mostly due to burnout on core design's part. They were basically forced to make Tomb Raider every year for several years. Eventually, the series would fade into obscurity, though it would sort of come back with a less than stellar cinematic adaptation, but would finally regain its place in pop culture with an excellent reboot, which, while I'm not a big fan of these classic games, I am a huge fan of the rebooted series, and that's what I recommend over this game. Still, the original Tomb Raider is still interesting to check out. Recommended if you want to see where the series got its start.